The sun blazed mercilessly over the cracked Arizona dirt as Tobias Crow stared at the last drops of water in his wooden bucket. 7 tribes would arrive at his doorstep within hours, but he had no idea his next decision would change everything. His weathered hands shook as he lifted the bucket. 3 days without rain. His cattle were dying. His crops withered to dust, and his water well had run dry that morning. The bank notice crumpled in his pocket reminded him he had 12 days before losing everything his late wife Sarah had helped him build. Tobias wiped the sweat from his brow and trudged toward his dying vegetable garden. Maybe he could save a few tomato plants with what little water remained. But as he rounded the corner of his small wooden cabin, he froze. A man lay face down near his fence, blood pooling beneath a gash in his shoulder, long black hair matted with dirt and sweat. Apache clothing, torn and stained, a warrior by the look of his build, and the knife still gripped in his unconscious hand. Tobias's heart hammered against his ribs. Apaches meant trouble. Everyone knew that. His neighbors had warned him about venturing too far from town, about the raids, about the violence that could erupt without warning. This man could be dangerous. This man could bring others. But then Tobias noticed something that made him pause. The stranger's lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. His chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate gasps. The blood on his shoulder had started to clot, but infection would set in soon under this brutal sun. Tobias looked down at his precious water bucket. Those drops represented his last chance to save something, anything, from this drought. His own survival hung in the balance. The Apache warrior stirred slightly, letting out a weak groan. His eyes fluttered open for just a moment, meeting Tobias's gaze with a mixture of pain and wariness before closing again. Tobias knew what his neighbors would say, what any sensible man would do. Leave the Apache to his fate, and preserve what little water remained for his own desperate needs. But something deeper stirred in Tobias's chest as he watched the stranger struggle for each breath. Maybe it was the memory of Sarah's voice, always reminding him that mercy was never wasted. Maybe it was the way this man looked so much like any other human being suffering under the merciless sun. Without another thought, Tobias knelt beside the wounded Apache and gently lifted his head. He pressed the rim of the bucket to the man's cracked lips and let the precious water flow. The stranger's eyes opened wide with surprise as the cool liquid touched his tongue. He drank desperately, and Tobias didn't pull the bucket away until every last drop was gone. What Tobias didn't know was that he'd just saved the nephew of Chief Running Bear, war leader of the most powerful Apache confederation in the territory. And by morning, his small ranch would be surrounded by warriors carrying enough gold to change his life forever. But first, this wounded man had something he needed to tell him about the 7 tribes riding toward them at that very moment. The Apache warrior struggled to sit up, his dark eyes studying Tobias with an intensity that made the rancher's skin crawl. Here he was, defenseless, having just given away his last water to a man who could kill him without breaking a sweat. The stranger spoke in broken English, his voice hoarse but steady. You give water. Why?" His hand moved instinctively toward the knife at his belt, not in threat, but as if checking it was still there. Tobias backed up slightly, suddenly aware of how alone he was out here. His nearest neighbor lived 5 miles away. No one would hear him scream. "You were dying," he said simply, trying to keep the tremor out of his voice. The warrior's eyes narrowed, as if searching for deception. "White man, never help Apache. Always shoot first." He tested his wounded shoulder, wincing but managing to move it. "Maybe I'm different." Tobias's mouth felt dry as sandpaper now. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd given his water to save a man who might not hesitate to take his life. But instead of reaching for his weapon, the Apache did something unexpected. He reached into a leather pouch tied to his belt and pulled out a small object wrapped in animal hide. His movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial. "My name is Ayana, nephew of Chief Running Bear." The warrior's English was better than he'd first let on. "You saved my life. Apache law demands payment." Tobias felt a chill despite the blazing heat. Payment from Apaches could mean anything. It could mean they'd leave him alone, or It could mean they'd return in greater numbers to test this strange white man who showed mercy. Ayana unwrapped the object in his hand, revealing a small piece of turquoise carved into the shape of an eagle. This is sacred. It marks you as friend to the 7 tribes. He held it out to Tobias, who hesitated before taking it. The moment the turquoise touched Tobias's palm, Ayana's expression changed entirely. His eyes widened with something that looked like shock, then fear, then urgency. "You not understand," Ayana said, struggling to his feet, despite his injury. "The 7 tribes. They already come. My uncle sent warriors to find me when I not return." He looked toward the horizon, squinting against the sun. "They think you capture me, kill me." Tobias felt his stomach drop. How many warriors? Maybe 50, maybe more. Ayana gripped Tobias's arm with surprising strength. "They see me wounded on your land. They think you enemy. They come to take revenge." The piece of turquoise suddenly felt burning hot in Tobias's hand. He looked from the sacred stone to Ayana's worried face, trying to process what he was hearing. "But I helped you," Tobias said desperately. "I gave you water. I saved your life." Ayana nodded grimly. "I know this. You know this. But my uncle, he see only wounded nephew near white man's home. He think you try to kill me. Leave me to die as warning to other tribes." The sound of distant thunder rolled across the desert, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. Both men turned toward the horizon, where a dust cloud was beginning to form. Ayana's face went pale beneath his bronze skin. "They come now. Maybe 1 hour, maybe less." He looked at Tobias with a mixture of gratitude and desperation. "The sacred eagle, it protect you if they believe me. But if they think I lie to save my own life." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Tobias could imagine what 50 Apache warriors would do to a lone rancher they believed had tried to murder their chief's nephew. But as the dust cloud grew larger on the horizon, Ayana revealed something that would change everything about what was coming next. Ayana gripped Tobias's shoulder with desperate urgency. "There is something else, something you must know before they arrive." His voice dropped to an urgent whisper. "I was not alone when I was wounded. I carry something that will make this much worse." Tobias felt his blood turn to ice. "What do you mean?" 3 days ago, my uncle sent me to deliver message to other tribal leaders. 7 tribes forming alliance against Army Fort, 20 miles north. They plan to drive soldiers away for good. Ayana's eyes darted toward the approaching dust cloud. "I carry sacred war tokens from each chief, proof of alliance." The rancher stared at him in horror. "You're telling me you have evidence of a tribal war alliance? And they're going to find it here? Worse." Ayana struggled toward a cluster of rocks near Tobias's fence. "Yesterday, soldiers ambush me. They want the tokens, want to know about alliance. I escape, but barely. I hide tokens before I collapse on your land." Tobias followed him, his mind racing. This wasn't just about saving a wounded man anymore. This was about being caught in the middle of a war between the U.S. Army and 7 Apache tribes. Ayana knelt painfully beside a large boulder and began moving smaller stones. "If my uncle finds tokens missing, he think you steal them. If soldiers find them here, they think you working with Apache against Army." He looked up at Tobias with grim certainty. "Either way, you dead man." From beneath the rocks, Ayana pulled out a leather bundle wrapped in sacred red cloth. Even without unwrapping it, Tobias could see it contained multiple objects, carved bones, metal pieces, what looked like scalps, and other items he didn't want to identify. 7 war tokens, Ayana confirmed, 1 from each tribal chief. Together, they mean coordinated attack on Fort Bravery. Hundreds of soldiers will die if this alliance succeeds. Tobias felt the world spinning around him. "So what do we do? If I give them back to your uncle, I'm helping plan an attack on American soldiers. If I don't, 50 Apache warriors will skin me alive." "There is third option," Ayana said quietly, "but you will not like it." Before he could explain, the thunder of approaching horses grew louder. Through the heat haze, Tobias could now make out individual riders, war paint, weapons glinting in the sun. They rode in formation, not the scattered approach of a search party, but the disciplined advance of warriors preparing for battle. "They already think you enemy," Ayana said, rewrapping the tokens quickly. "They see me wounded. They see you standing over me with these tokens. They will assume you torture me for information, then try to sell secrets to army. Tobias's mouth went completely dry. But that's insane. I'm just a farmer. I don't even own a gun. Apache law is simple, Ayanna replied, hiding the bundle back under the rocks. Enemy who captures war chief's nephew and steals sacred token must die slowly. Very slowly. The lead rider was close enough now that Tobias could see his face. War paint in red and black stripes. A massive man with scars across his chest and arms. This had to be Chief Running Bear himself. Tell me the third option, Tobias said desperately. Ayanna stood up slowly, testing his wounded shoulder. We convince my uncle that you are not enemy, that you are chosen by spirits to help 7 tribes win this war. He looked directly into Tobias's eyes. But to do that, you must agree to something that will make you traitor to your own people. The war party was now close enough that Tobias could hear individual war cries. 50 mounted Apache warriors, all armed, all painted for battle, riding directly toward his small ranch. And somewhere in that approaching thundercloud of violence, Chief Running Bear was about to discover something about his nephew's rescue that would change the fate of everyone involved. The war party slowed as they approached, forming a wide circle around Tobias's property. Chief Running Bear dismounted, his massive frame casting a shadow across the dusty ground. His face was a mask of controlled fury as he surveyed the scene. His wounded nephew standing beside a white rancher, both men looking guilty as sin. Running Bear spoke in rapid Apache to Ayanna, his voice sharp with accusation. Tobias couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. A powerful man demanding answers about his injured family member. Ayanna responded quickly, gesturing toward Tobias, and then toward the empty water bucket lying nearby. But Running Bear's expression only grew darker. He barked another question, pointing directly at Tobias. What's he saying? Tobias whispered. He asks why white man helps Apache. He thinks it trap. Ayanna kept his voice low. He says white men only show kindness when they want something. He wants to know what you really want. Running Bear approached Tobias slowly, his hand resting on a wickedly curved knife at his belt. The other warriors remained mounted but ready, their weapons gleaming in the afternoon sun. The chief's dark eyes studied Tobias from head to toe, taking in his worn clothes, calloused hands, and desperate expression. When Running Bear spoke again, his English was clear and precise, each word measured like a judge pronouncing sentence. My nephew tells interesting story. Says you give last water to dying Apache. Says you show mercy when you could show bullets. He paused, circling Tobias like a predator. But Apache know white man tricks. What you really want? Farmer. Tobias's heart hammered so hard he was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment Ayanna had warned him about. If he said the wrong thing, 50 warriors would turn him into an example for the next white man who crossed their path. I don't want anything, Tobias said, surprising himself with how steady his voice sounded. Your nephew was dying. I had water. It seemed right. Running Bear stopped circling and stared directly into Tobias's eyes. Right? He spat in the dust. White soldiers kill Apache children. Think it right. White settlers take Apache land. Think it right. White government break every promise. Think it right. His voice rose with decades of accumulated rage. Now white farmer claims he saved Apache life because it... right? The tension in the air was so thick Tobias could barely breathe. Every warrior in the circle was watching this exchange, waiting for their chief's signal. One wrong word, and this would end in violence. But then Ayanna stepped forward and said something that changed everything. He pulled out the sacred turquoise eagle and held it up for all to see, speaking rapidly in Apache while pointing between Tobias and the carved stone. Running Bear's eyes widened. Several of the mounted warriors leaned forward in their saddles, murmuring among themselves. The chief took the turquoise piece from his nephew and examined it carefully, turning it over in his weathered hands. This is sacred eagle of the water spirits, Running Bear said slowly, his anger replaced by something that looked like amazement. Ayanna says when you touch it, it grow warm. Says spirits recognize you as friend to Apache people. Tobias had no idea what was happening, but he could feel the mood of the war party shifting. The hostility was still there, but now it was mixed with uncertainty, maybe even awe. But there is problem, Running Bear continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Ayanna carries something very important when soldiers attack him, something that proves Apache strength to white world. His eyes bored into Tobias. If this thing is lost, if you have taken it or soldiers have found it, friendship means nothing. If you were Tobias, what would you do? Admit you know about the war tokens and risk being seen as a spy, or play innocent and hope they don't search your property? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you'd choose, because what happened next would determine whether Tobias lived to see another sunrise. Running Bear gestured to his warriors, and they began dismounting. We search your land, white man. If we find what we look for, you live. If we find you have stolen sacred war tokens from Apache people, he drew his knife and tested its edge against his thumb. You die very slowly, and your screams will warn other white men not to steal from the 7 tribes. But as the warriors spread out to begin their search, none of them noticed what Ayanna was secretly doing behind the boulder, where the tokens lay hidden. While the warriors spread across Tobias's property, Ayanna moved behind the boulder with careful, deliberate movement. His wounded shoulders screamed in protest, but he managed to shift several rocks without making noise. His plan was desperate, but it might save both their lives. Running Bear supervised the search, his sharp eyes missing nothing as his men examined every inch of the ranch. They searched the cabin, the barn, even the dried-up well. Tobias watched in growing terror as they methodically worked their way toward the boulder where the war tokens lay hidden. Tell me about soldiers, Running Bear said suddenly, stepping close to Tobias. Ayanna says they ambush him near your land. You see them? Tobias's throat felt like sandpaper. No, sir. I've been dealing with the drought. Haven't seen anyone for days. The chief's expression was unreadable. Strange that soldiers attack so close to white farmers' land. Strange that Apache warrior ends up wounded at your door. His hand drifted back to his knife handle, almost like someone planned this meeting. Before Tobias could respond, one of the warriors called out from near the fence. He'd found some drops of dried blood leading from the desert toward the boulder. Running Bear's eyes followed the trail, and Tobias felt his heart stop. The chief strode toward the rocks where Ayanna knelt, apparently checking his wound. But Tobias could see what Running Bear couldn't. Ayanna had managed to unwrap the war tokens and was quickly separating them. Move away from rocks, nephew, Running Bear commanded in English. Let warriors search properly. Ayanna stood slowly, palming something in his good hand. Uncle, I only rest wounded shoulder. Search where you wish. 2 warriors began moving the rocks aside, working methodically toward the spot where the tokens had been hidden. Tobias watched in fascination and terror as they removed stone after stone, getting closer to the hiding place. Then one of them stopped and called out excitedly. He'd found something wrapped in red cloth. Running Bear rushed over as the warrior pulled out the bundle and handed it to his chief. But when Running Bear unwrapped it, his face showed confusion instead of relief. Inside the cloth were only 4 tokens instead of 7, 4 carved pieces of bone and metal, but not the complete set that would prove the alliance. This is not complete, Running Bear said, his voice dangerous. 3 tokens missing, 3 tribes not represented. He turned to Tobias with murder in his eyes. Where are other 3? What you do with them? Tobias had no idea what to say. He didn't know which tokens were missing or where they might be. But before he could answer, Ayanna spoke up. Uncle, maybe soldiers took missing tokens when they ambushed me. Maybe I dropped them during fight. His voice was carefully neutral, but Tobias caught something in his tone, a subtle emphasis that suggested he was lying to protect someone. Running Bear examined the 4 remaining tokens carefully. These prove alliance with Mountain Apache, Desert Apache, Wind Apache, and Stone Apache. But missing are tokens from River Apache, Night Apache, and Blood Apache. His voice dropped to a whisper on the last name. Without Blood Apache token, alliance is incomplete. War cannot begin. The chief walked slowly back to Tobias, the incomplete bundle in his hands. Blood Apache are most fierce fighters. Their token most important. Without it, other tribes will not attack fort. He stopped directly in front of the terrified rancher. If you have stolen Blood Apache token, you have saved many white soldiers' lives. You have also signed your own death warrant. Tobias opened his mouth to protest his innocence, but Running Bear held up a hand for silence. There is one way to prove you speak truth. One test that will show if spirits truly mark you as friend to Apache people. The chief turned to his warriors and spoke rapidly in Apache. Several of them looked shocked. Some even seemed to argue with him, but Running Bear's voice cut through their objections with absolute authority. "We will take you to sacred place," he announced to Tobias. "If you are truly chosen by spirits, sacred fire will not burn you. If you lie, if you steal from Apache people, flames will consume you slowly." Ayana's face went pale, and Tobias realized with growing horror that this test was probably a death sentence no matter what the outcome. But as the warriors prepared to move out, none of them noticed the 3 missing war tokens that Ayana had secretly pressed into Tobias's hand during their conversation. Tokens that would soon reveal the most shocking truth of all. The war party moved toward the sacred place, with Tobias riding double behind one of the warriors. His hands were bound, but he could feel the 3 hidden tokens pressing against his palm where Ayana had secretly placed them. Each carved piece felt like it was burning through his skin. As they rode, Ayana managed to maneuver his horse close to Tobias. Speaking in a whisper that barely carried over the sound of hoofbeats, he revealed the truth that changed everything. "The missing tokens, they are not stolen," Ayana said urgently. "I separate them on purpose. River Apache token, Night Apache token, Blood Apache token. They prove something my uncle must not know." Tobias stared at him in confusion. "What do you mean? Those 3 tribes, they not join alliance to fight army. They join alliance to destroy it." Ayana's voice was filled with pain that had nothing to do with his wounded shoulder. "Blood Apache chief plans to betray other 4 tribes. Let them attack fort first, get slaughtered by soldiers, then Blood Apache take their land." The revelation hit Tobias like a physical blow. "You're saying this whole alliance is a trap?" "Yes. River Apache and Night Apache help Blood Apache because they promised share of conquered territory. But I discovered truth 3 days ago. I was trying to warn my uncle when soldiers attack me." Ayana's eyes were desperate. "If alliance continues, my people will ride into massacre. Hundreds will die." Tobias felt the weight of the tokens in his hand. "So why give these to me? Why not tell your uncle directly?" "Because my uncle's brother is chief of Blood Apache. Family blood runs deeper than tribal loyalty. If I accuse his brother of betrayal without absolute proof, my uncle will execute me for treason." Ayana glanced ahead at Running Bear, who rode at the front of the group. "But if White Man reveals betrayal, if Sacred Fire test proves you chosen by spirits to save Apache people, then my uncle must listen." They crested a hill, and Tobias saw their destination. A natural amphitheater of red rock surrounded a circular area where the ground was blackened from countless fires. Ancient symbols were carved into the stone walls, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with spiritual energy. Running Bear called a halt and dismounted. His warriors formed a circle around the sacred fire pit, while the chief began gathering wood and kindling. The ritual preparations were elaborate and precise, suggesting this ceremony was both ancient and deadly serious. "Sacred fire will reveal truth," Running Bear announced as flames began to rise from the pit. "If you are friend to Apache people, fire spirits will protect you. If you are enemy, fire will cleanse your lives with pain." But as the flames grew higher, Ayana whispered the most crucial information yet. "When fire test begins, you must throw tokens into flames while speaking names of the 3 betrayer tribe. Fire will show my uncle the truth about his brother's betrayal. But if you hesitate, if you fail to speak clearly, fire will kill you before truth can be revealed." Tobias stared at the growing inferno. The heat was already intense from 20 feet away. Up close, it would be unbearable. "How do I know the fire won't kill me anyway?" "You don't," Ayana admitted. "But I know this. If you do nothing, alliance will proceed. 4 loyal tribes will attack Fort and be destroyed. Blood Apache will claim their territory. And war between Apache and white soldiers will continue for generations. Running Bear approached with a ceremonial staff, his face painted with fresh war colors for the ritual. Time for test, white man. Step into sacred fire. Let flames judge your heart. As Tobias was led toward the blazing pit, he felt the 3 hidden tokens burning in his palm. Everything depended on the next few minutes. His life, the fate of 4 Apache tribes, and the future of peace between his people and theirs. The warriors began chanting in their ancient language as Tobias stepped to the edge of the fire pit. The heat was so intense it felt like his skin was already burning. But worse than the physical pain was the knowledge that he was about to accuse Chief Running Bear's own brother of treachery. If the sacred fire didn't kill him, family loyalty might finish the job. But as Tobias prepared to step into the flames, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the canyon, and what he saw riding toward them would turn this trial by fire into something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. A new war party thundered into the sacred canyon, their horses lathered with sweat and their weapons raised. At their head rode a massive Apache warrior whose face bore striking resemblance to Running Bear. This had to be the Blood Apache chief, Running Bear's brother, and the architect of the betrayal Ayanna had discovered. Blood Bear dismounted with fluid grace, his scarred face splitting into a cold smile as he surveyed the scene. Behind him rode 20 of his finest warriors, along with representatives from the River Apache and Night Apache tribe. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. "Brother," Blood Bear called out in English, his voice carrying across the canyon, "I see you have found the missing token, and the white man who stole them." Running Bear's expression showed confusion and growing suspicion. "How did you know we search for tokens? How did you know to find us here?" "Word travels fast among the tribes," Blood Bear replied, but his eyes never left Tobias. "When Ayanna failed to return with Sacred Alliance tokens, we began our own search. We tracked soldier movements, questioned captured scouts." His smile grew wider and more menacing. "We discovered very interesting information about this white farmer." Tobias felt ice form in his stomach, despite the blazing heat from the sacred fire. Blood Bear was too calm, too prepared. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was something else entirely. "What information?" Running Bear demanded. Blood Bear gestured to one of his warriors, who pulled a bound and beaten white man from horseback. The prisoner's army uniform was torn and bloody, but the sergeant's stripes were still visible on his sleeve. "This soldier was part of patrol that ambushed Ayanna," Blood Bear announced. "Before he died, he told us very interesting story about arrangement with certain ranchers. Arrangement to steal Apache war tokens and sell them to Army Fort." The accusation hit like a thunderbolt. Running Bear spun toward Tobias, his face contorting with rage and betrayal. "You work with soldiers? You planned this from beginning?" "No!" Tobias protested desperately. "That's not true. I never saw any soldier." But Blood Bear wasn't finished. "Soldier said rancher agreed to help Army learn about Apache Alliance. Said rancher would capture any Apache found on his land, torture them for information about planned attacks." He pointed directly at Tobias. "Said if Ayanna escaped with tokens, rancher would gain his trust, then lead him to sacred places where Army could attack tribal leaders." The lies were so elaborate, so perfectly crafted, that even Tobias found himself wondering if there was some truth he'd forgotten. But Ayanna stepped forward, his face pale with understanding. "Uncle, this is trick," Ayanna said urgently. "Brother lies to you. The soldier probably told truth about arrangement, but not with this man. Someone else makes deal with Army." Blood Bear's eyes flashed with dangerous anger. "You accuse me of lying, nephew? You choose white man's word over family blood?" The tension in the canyon ratcheted up to breaking point. 2 factions of Apache warriors faced each other across the sacred fire. Weapons ready, loyalty divided. Running Bear stood between his brother and his nephew, forced to choose between family ties and growing suspicion. "There is easy way to prove truth," Blood Bear said, his voice silky with false reasonableness. "Let white man undergo sacred fire test as planned. If he is innocent, fire will protect him. If he is spy, Flames will burn away his lies. But Tobias realized with growing horror that Bloodbear wanted him to take the test. Because he was confident the flames would kill him before he could reveal the 3 hidden tokens. Without that evidence, Bloodbear's betrayal would remain secret, and the massacre of the 4 loyal tribes would proceed as planned. As Running Bear gestured for Tobias to step into the sacred fire, the rancher made a desperate decision. Instead of walking slowly into the flames, he pulled out the 3 hidden tokens and held them high above his head. "Before I face the fire," Tobias shouted, "these belong to the Apache people." And he hurled all 3 war tokens directly into the blazing inferno, calling out the names Ayanna had taught him: River Apache, Night Apache, Blood Apache. The reaction was instantaneous and explosive. The tokens began to glow in the flames, and carved symbols became visible on their surfaces. Symbols that told a story of betrayal and treachery that could no longer be hidden. The war tokens glowed like stars in the sacred fire, and the carved symbols told their damning story. On the River Apache token, symbols showed mountains of gold changing hands. On the Night Apache token, drawings depicted attacks on Apache villages, not army forts. But it was the Blood Apache token that revealed the most devastating truth. Carved into its surface was a map showing Fort Bravery's location, soldier patrol routes, and detailed drawings of Apache tribal camps. But the symbols weren't intelligence gathered for an attack. They were information being sold to the army. Running Bear stared at the glowing tokens in shock, then turned to his brother with dawning understanding. "These show betrayal. They show Blood Apache working with soldiers against our people." Bloodbear's mask finally slipped. His hand moved to his weapon as his eyes darted between the sacred fire and the circle of warriors surrounding them. "Brother, you trust lying white man and foolish nephew over family blood?" "I trust sacred fire," Running Bear replied, his voice cold as winter wind. "Fire spirits do not lie. These tokens show Blood Apache chief selling information to army, planning to let other tribes be slaughtered while claiming their land." The warriors from all tribes murmured in shock and growing anger. The evidence blazing in the sacred fire was undeniable. Bloodbear realized his elaborate deception was crumbling, and his response was swift and brutal. "If I cannot lead alliance," he snarled, drawing his knife, "then alliance dies today." He lunged toward Tobias, intending to kill the witness who had exposed his treachery. But Ayanna intercepted him, despite his wounded shoulder, and the 2 Apache warriors crashed to the ground beside the sacred fire. They rolled dangerously close to the flame, each struggling for control of Bloodbear's knife. Running Bear shouted orders to his warrior, but the situation exploded into chaos. Bloodbear's supporters moved to defend their chief, while the other tribal representatives realized they'd been manipulated into a conspiracy that would have destroyed their people. In the melee, Tobias found himself forgotten by most of the combatants. But as he watched Ayanna struggling against his larger, stronger uncle, the rancher made a decision that went against every survival instinct he possessed. He grabbed a burning branch from the sacred fire and charged into the fight, driving the flaming wood toward Bloodbear's face. The traitorous chief was forced to release his nephew and roll away from the fire, giving Ayanna the opening he needed to disarm him. When the dust settled, Bloodbear lay bound and defeated, his conspiracy exposed, and his supporters either captured or fled. The sacred tokens continued to glow in the fire, their message of betrayal clear to all who witnessed it. Running Bear approached Tobias slowly, his expression unreadable. The rancher stood ready to face whatever judgment was coming, knowing he'd done the right thing even if it cost him his life. "White man," the chief said formally, "you have proven yourself friend to Apache people. You saved my nephew's life. You expose betrayal that would have destroyed 4 tribes. You risk your own life to protect family honor." He paused, then continued with genuine respect. "Sacred fire has judged you worthy. Apache people owe you debt that cannot be repaid with words." What came next surprised everyone present. Running Bear gestured to his warriors, who began pulling leather bags from their horses. Bag after bag of gold nuggets, silver, and precious stones, the accumulated wealth of 7 tribes gathered for the alliance. This gold was meant to buy weapons for war, Running Bear explained. But war built on betrayal would have brought only death and sorrow. Instead, gold goes to man, who prevented massacre. He placed a heavy bag in Tobias's hands. 7 tribes give you this freely, as payment for saving Apache honor. Tobias stared at the fortune in his hands, hardly believing what was happening. I can't take this. I just did what was right. Exactly why you deserve it, Ayanna said, grinning despite his injury. Apache people always pay their debts. If you've been enjoying this incredible journey of honor and redemption, hit that subscribe button, because stories like this are what we're all about on this channel. As the sun set over the Arizona desert, Tobias Crow rode home a wealthy man, his saddlebags heavy with gold from 7 grateful tribes. The drought would end eventually, his ranch would prosper, and he would never again face the desperate poverty that had nearly broken him. More importantly, he had prevented a war that would have cost hundreds of lives on both sides. The alliance between the Apache tribes was reformed on honest terms, with Running Bear as the sole leader and Blood Bear exiled forever from tribal land. Ayanna recovered from his wounds and became Running Bear's war chief, leading diplomatic missions to other tribes and helping forge a lasting peace with the territorial government. The sacred turquoise eagle remained with Tobias as a symbol of friendship between his family and the Apache people. And every year, on the anniversary of that fateful day, representatives from the 7 tribes would visit Tobias's ranch to share a meal and remember the time when one white man's simple act of mercy changed the course of history for both their people. In the end, Tobias learned that sometimes the smallest gesture, sharing water with a dying stranger, can ripple outward to create waves of change that touch countless lives. His act of compassion had saved not just one man, but 2 entire people from a devastating war built on lies and betrayal. Now, click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with a twist so powerful it'll stay with you long after the dust settles. Click on the video now